A woman walked into a department store last month, wearing the same perfume she has worn since 2010, and within 30 seconds the counter associate, unprompted, told her it was a young scent and steered her toward something more her age. She bought nothing that day. She wrote to me instead, and what she described was not really about perfume at all. It was about being quietly told her taste had expired before anyone bothered to check whether it had. That interaction is the reason this test exists. Every fragrance house on earth knows exactly what sophistication is supposed to smell like once a woman crosses 50, and most of them are selling you the opposite of what actually works, dressed up in gold packaging and words like timeless and iconic. You have felt this before, standing at a counter, spraying something that smells expensive in the air, and then finding, hours later, that it has turned into something loud, syrupy, or strangely juvenile against your own skin. This isn't about whether you can still wear a bold scent. You can. It's about which bold scents are actually doing what you think they're doing, and which ones are quietly working against the very sophistication they're supposed to project. File that distinction away, because we're coming back to it before this is over. Yves Saint Laurent Black Opium is positioned as the fragrance for a woman who refuses to fade into the background, and at $128 for 90 milliliters, it has become one of the most consistently reached for bottles on any counter in the country. The opening is dense and immediate. Black coffee, vanilla, and a sweetness that reads almost like burnt sugar, with white flowers pushing up underneath it. What it does well is entrance. Nothing else on a crowded counter smells quite like it, and that recognizability made it a signature scent for an entire generation of women in their 20s and 30s. Here is the catch nobody at the counter will name directly. That same unmistakable coffee vanilla signature has become so widely worn by women 20 and 30 years younger than 50 that it now reads, on mature skin, less like personal signature and more like borrowed identity. The bottle promises a fragrance built entirely around you. What it more often delivers, on this particular demographic, is a fragrance that immediately places you in someone else's decade. Notice the pattern already forming. The industry doesn't sell women over 50 fragrance. It sells them a choice between fading quietly or borrowing someone else's youth in a bottle, and both options are designed to make you doubt your own instincts. Maison Francis Kurkdjian Baccarat Rouge 540 is positioned as the ultimate proof of exceptional taste, the fragrance people ask about in elevators, and at $325 for 70 milliliters, it has built an almost cult-like following. On skin, it opens as heated sugar and saffron, drifting into something mineral and faintly metallic, like sun on warm stone. What it does genuinely well is diffusion. It creates a cloud around you that lingers in a room long after you've left it, an effect very few fragrances at any price point can replicate. Here's where the story gets complicated. Baccarat Rouge has been so aggressively cloned, copied, and chased by nearly every fragrance house under $100 that its scent profile now shows up, in diluted form, in shopping mall body mists worn by teenagers. A woman over 50 wearing the original isn't standing apart from that. She is, whether she intends to or not, wearing the source material for a trend that has nothing to do with the presence and restraint she's actually trying to project. La Vie est Belle by Lancôme is positioned as pure, uncomplicated happiness in a bottle, and at $98 for 100 milliliters, it remains one of the best-selling women's fragrances in the world for a reason. The scent is built around iris, praline, and a rich vanilla patchouli base that smells genuinely comforting, almost like a warm dessert wrapped in silk. What it does well is universal likability. Almost nobody dislikes it on first smell, which explains its staggering commercial success. The flaw sits exactly where the strength does. Its sweetness is so unrelentingly consistent from the first spray to the 12th hour that it leaves almost no room for the fragrance to develop or surprise anyone, including you. A perfume that never changes across a day starts to feel less like a signature and more like wallpaper, pleasant, familiar, and completely forgettable to everyone standing near you by hour 6. Ask yourself something here. When was the last time someone complimented one of these bestsellers specifically, rather than simply not objecting to it? There's a real difference between a fragrance people tolerate and one they remember, and that gap is exactly where this entire test lives. Carolina Herrera Good Girl is positioned as bold contradiction, sweetness and darkness in the same bottle, and at $132 for 80 milliliters, its stiletto-shaped bottle has become nearly as recognizable as the scent itself. The opening delivers almond, coffee, and tuberose with real intensity before settling into tonka bean and cacao. What it does well is projection. This is not a shy fragrance, and it announces itself the moment you walk into a room. The catch is precisely that intensity. On mature skin, where natural oil production has typically decreased, and a fragrance's dry down often reads differently than it did on younger, oilier skin, Good Girl's heavy tonka cacao base can turn cloying rather than sultry within a few hours, tipping from confident into overwhelming, in a way the bottle's elegant silhouette never warns you about. Viktor and Rolf Flowerbomb is positioned as an explosion of femininity, and at $138 for 90 milliliters, it has spent nearly 2 decades as a staple in fragrance wardrobes worldwide. It opens with jasmine and rose absolute, wrapped in a dense, honeyed patchouli base that lives up to its name entirely. What it does well is sheer floral richness. There are few florals on the market with this much depth. Here's the part rarely said out loud. Flowerbomb's patchouli vanilla base has a documented tendency to intensify rather than soften over the course of the day, meaning the same spray that feels rich and elegant at 9 in the morning can feel heavy and almost cloying by 5 in the afternoon, particularly in warm rooms or during long social occasions, exactly the settings where a woman over 50 is most likely wearing it. Before the results, one practical note. I keep a running, updated price and testing guide for every fragrance mentioned in these videos, including where to find the exact bottle sizes discussed here without paying inflated resale markups, and it's linked in the description below. It's the resource I wish someone had handed me years before I started doing this professionally. Here is exactly how these 5 were measured against what actually matters for this specific question, and none of these 4 criteria are the obvious ones you'll find in a typical review. The first was skin chemistry drift, meaning how a fragrance's character changes as skin's natural oil production shifts with age, since a scent built to shine on oilier, younger skin can behave completely differently once that chemistry changes. The second was memory association risk, meaning whether a fragrance is so tightly associated with a particular decade or age group that wearing it creates an unintended timestamp rather than a timeless impression. The third was occasion elasticity, meaning whether a single bottle can move convincingly from a morning meeting to an evening dinner without needing to be swapped out. The fourth was complement specificity, meaning whether people who smell it can actually describe what makes it distinctive, or simply register that something pleasant walked by. The choice that earns an unqualified recommendation here is Chanel Cristalle Eau de Parfum at $155 for 100 milliliters. No hedging on this one. Crystal wins on skin chemistry drift because its citrus jasmine oak moss structure is built for clarity rather than density, meaning it doesn't rely on youthful oil production to stay balanced. It simply reads clean at any age. It wins on memory association risk because it has never been the fragrance of a single viral moment or a single generation, which means it carries no accidental timestamp at all. It wins on occasion elasticity in a way none of the 5 we just discussed can match, moving convincingly from a morning at the office to a formal dinner without ever needing to be reapplied or reconsidered. And it wins on complement specificity because what people notice about Cristalle is never simply, "You smell nice." It's, "What is that?" asked by people who can tell the difference between a fragrance chosen and one simply worn. Remember the distinction I asked you to file away earlier, between borrowed identity and personal signature. Cristalle is the answer to that question. An independent fragrance consultant I've worked with for years, who evaluates scent wardrobes for clients privately rather than publicly, mentioned something almost identical to my own conclusion before I'd said a word about my results. She said the biggest mistake she sees in women over 50 isn't wearing something too bold, it's wearing something engineered for a nervous system and skin chemistry they no longer have, then blaming themselves when it doesn't land the way it used to. A longtime vintage perfume collector I spoke with separately made a sharper observation still. He said the fragrances that actually age well alongside a woman are almost always the ones built on structure and clarity, rather than sweetness and density, because sweetness fatigues both the nose and the room, while structure simply endures. Neither of them knew what the other had said. Both of them said, in their own words, almost exactly what the testing had already shown. If you're deciding what to do with everything just covered, start here. Buy Chanel Cristalle Eau de Parfum at $155 for 100 milliliters, without hesitation, if you want one fragrance that moves through every part of your life without ever needing translation. Keep Yves Saint Laurent Black Opium at $128 for 90 milliliters only for evenings, where you specifically want its dense coffee vanilla signature, and don't mind that thousands of much younger women are wearing the identical thing tonight. Reach for Maison Francis Kurkdjian Baccarat Rouge 540 at $325 for 70 milliliters only. If you've genuinely tested it against its now ubiquitous imitators and still prefer the original, Understanding you're paying luxury pricing for a scent profile that no longer signals rarity the way it once did. Consider La Vie est Belle at $98 for 100 milliliters. Only if effortless, uncomplicated sweetness is specifically what you want and you're not seeking a fragrance people remember distinctly. Approach Carolina Herrera Good Girl at $132 for 80 milliliters carefully, testing it on your own skin for a full 8 hours before committing, since its intensity can shift unpredictably as the day wears on. And treat Viktor and Rolf Flowerbomb at $138 for 90 milliliters as an evening-only choice, since its richness tends to overstay its welcome in daytime or warm settings. The wisdom underneath all 6 of these verdicts is the same. The right fragrance for this stage of your life was never about smelling younger or smelling safer. It was always about smelling like someone who stopped asking permission. What this test actually revealed has very little to do with perfume and everything to do with how women are conditioned, at every age, to treat their own instincts as something to be corrected by someone else's expertise. Whether that someone is a counter-associate, an algorithm, or a marketing department that profits directly from your uncertainty. The women who navigate this best are the ones who've learned that taste doesn't need defending, only trusting. If this kind of honest, specific breakdown is what you come here for, you already know where the subscribe button is, and I'd rather earn that click-through work like this than ask for it directly. Tell me which of these 5 you're currently wearing, and whether Cristalle's clarity sounds like a relief or feels like it's asking you to give up something you're not ready to let go of yet.